Also, for those of you who are already here, I just want to let you know that it says on your dashboard that Beth Wittenbury is the person speaking. She's actually the organizer of this webinar under the umbrella of IBMG, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So if you're confused about why it says Beth is speaking and it says Stacey on the screen, I can assure you that I'm Stacey. Beth could not be here today to be the host, which is no problem. You've got me. But I just didn't want you to be confused that it says that Beth is speaking. So anyway, it's 1 after. I know people are still kind of cruising in one at a time, but let's go ahead and get started. I want to first welcome you and thank you for being here with me today. I'm very, very excited to share all the information that I have with you. And I also would love to know where you're calling from. So if you would just type in the chat box, maybe your city and state, just for fun to see where we have people here from, that would be fun if you don't mind. I'm just waiting here to see. You've got Huntington Beach. Oh, not too far away. For those of you who don't know, I'm in Southern California in LA County. So we've got a Huntington Beach and a Santa Ana, which is all here in Southern Cal, Dana Point, Southern California. So far we've got the Southern Cal people here. The last webinar I did, I had people from Missouri and Texas and a couple other places back east. So it's always kind of fun to know where people are from. LA unincorporated county. Okay. All right. And we've got another LA and okay, great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. I want to let you know that the slides are available to you. There is a materials section in your dashboard, and there is a PDF there of today's slides. If you want to download them, you can click on it now or you can have it afterward. If for any reason you don't have access or you can't download them or you're having a problem, you can absolutely email me at the end. My email will be on the final slide and I will happily send them to you. You don't need them to view the presentation. That will all be on the screen, but I did want you to have access to them if you wanted them. Okay, as promised, I wanted to, first welcome you to the Keys to Self-Publishing Your Book with Punch, Polish, and Professionalism. I am Stacey Aaronson. I'm a professional book doctor. And as I said, if you just got here, I am not Beth Wittenbury, whose name is showing up as the person speaking. I am Stacey. Beth is actually our organizer for this event under the umbrella of IBMG. And what that is the Independent Book Marketing Group. It's a group that I'm a core member of. And we are dedicated to helping independently published authors sell more books by offering some different things on our website. And right now it's free. And we do have a lot of great stuff to offer. So if you didn't come here through IBMG, then I really encourage you to go there. We basically have a collection of blogs by leaders in the fields of book production and marketing. And we also are sharing valuable events for indie writers. So all of the webinars that we had going on in the last couple of weeks were up on the site. And in the near future, we really hope to build it out with some services that we offer too, as well as anything else that we can host for independent authors. So I really recommend popping over and taking a look at least a few times a week. Blog posts happen all the time and events are popping up all the time too. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a primer on IBMG in case you want to be part of it. Okay, if you don't know me, I am Stacey Aaronson. I am actually a bit unique in this field of publishing because I wear a lot of hats. Typically, people in publishing are editors or they're book designers or they're cover designers. Different roles that people play are typically kind of more of a niche in the field. I actually am very blessed to be able to bring many different levels of expertise to the table. So I actually get to work as a trusted partner for my author clients all the way from manuscript to market. And I do so as a writer, as an editor, I'm a book designer. I definitely am a hand holder. I have a very personalized, collaborative way of working with my authors. So I like to call myself a hand holder because I really am. I also help a great deal with the publishing facilitation. And I do create ebooks as well as interactive iBooks. I'm also a graphic and website designer, and I also help my authors with market analysis. So again, I do wear a lot of hats. Ultimately, though, what I want you to know is that I'm committed to producing only the highest quality books. Those books that when you hold them in your hand, you turn it over, you look inside, you're convinced it came from a bookstore. And that is really important to me for my author clients to have that top-notch quality book in their hands at the end of the process with me. So that is a little bit about me. Now let's jump into all the good stuff that we're going to talk about today. First, I want to start off with a 2013 publishing prediction that came out right at the beginning of the year. And this is from Nick Harrison, who's the senior editor at Harvest House Publishers. And Nick said, more and more frustrated writers will choose to self-publish. Not only is it easier than getting accepted by a traditional royalty publisher, but it's much faster, and if the book is successful, it's much more profitable. The catch, though, is that most self-published books are poorly done and won't be successful. Now, I want you to know that one of the biggest reasons I'm doing this webinar is because I've seen more and more self-published books that are so substandard, and they absolutely break my heart for the author. And I know a lot of it is because the authors just don't know any better. They're trying to do too much on their own. They don't really know what the proper steps are, the proper people to hire. They're just trying to do too much by themselves. And I've actually had more and more authors coming to me who did publish quite a substandard book on their own, and now they're saying, I realize I made a lot of mistakes and I want to have it done the right way. And of course, I'm very happy to redo their book the right way. But what breaks my heart is that they've already put money into it. Most of these books have already been up on Amazon. They've already sold. And not only do a lot of them have typos because they weren't professionally edited, but they didn't have a professional cover designer or interior designer. They just haven't taken the right steps. And so, unfortunately, they've already kind of marred their reputation to some degree, sometimes with poor reviews or bad feedback, or they're just strictly embarrassed because they realize after the fact that they just really didn't do it the way they should have the first time around. So my goal with all of you today is really to save you from making costly mistakes, and costly not just financially, but with your credibility and your reputation. And I also really want to take you from feeling intimidated and overwhelmed about self-publishing and perhaps having a false sense of what's involved, which is kind of what gets people in trouble in the first place, trying to do too much on their own, to being smarter, more knowledgeable, and more confident about what top-notch book production entails and what exciting opportunities are ahead for you as an author, because there really are great opportunities for self-publishing authors today. And I really want you to know that there are so many avenues for you and that you can be excited, and that's what today is all about. Okay, now I know that most of you here, or if not all of you, are writers, because why else would you be here? So I imagine that you're here for one of three reasons. Either you're a writer who's aspiring to write a book, you're a writer who's currently working on a book, or you're a writer who's written a book and is ready for the next steps. So do me a favor, just really quickly, type in your little chat bar. You can just type aspiring or currently working or written, just to give me an idea of who we have here and where everybody is as far as the different phases of writing and book production. So does anybody want to share? Are you an aspiring, a currently working, or a written? I've got one written, another written, but still editing. Good for you. Always good to edit a lot. Currently writing. Oh, this is great. Completed and online, working on the next one. Let's see here. This little box goes by fast. Here to learn, currently working. Okay, this is great. Well, I want you to know that no matter where you are in your book phase, you are going to learn a lot today. And hopefully I'm going to save you from making a lot of mistakes that a lot of other self-publishing authors are making, because I really, really want the best for you. So hopefully you will feel really great at the end of this about the direction you're headed in with your book, whether you're currently working or you're just here to learn or you're done and you're ready for the next steps. Okay. Now, I do have a unique perspective, and I just want to share that with you because I really understand what it's like from the writer's perspective because I am a writer. I have written a novel, actually two, but one was my practice novel many years ago. Maybe some of you have one of those in a box in the garage or in a drawer somewhere as well. But I am a writer, and having written a novel, I know what it's like to try to write while working full time, while trying to juggle around lots of other responsibilities and sit in a room alone and struggle with crises of confidence and to write something that I think I really love. And then I go back and go, oh, but I don't know, maybe I shouldn't think it's that great. So I know exactly what it's like to go back and forth in your mind as a writer about feeling good about what you've written and doubting if you're good enough and all those kinds of emotions. I also have a lot of author affiliations, and a big reason for that is because I'm involved in large-scale authors events. I'm actually a core member of two literary organizations here in Southern California, and we put on two annual events a year, and it's really, really fantastic to be involved in these events, but I also get to meet authors a lot, and so I really understand the perspective of the published author. I'm still rewriting my novel, so I'm not published yet. But I do understand the writer side, the working on the book side, the I'm already published side, what it's like to go to events and to try to market yourself and all those kinds of things because of the authors I know. So all of those things allow me to really understand the pain points, the vulnerabilities, and the overwhelm of being an author. So I just want you to know that I really relate to what you're going through as a writer. Okay, I'd like to toss a few statements out to you, and if you could just give me a quick yes or no in the chat box if you believe any of these. Now, don't feel intimidated by these questions. I just kind of want to toss them out and see if these are things that you believe or not. The first one is, traditional publishers handle everything, so I can just focus on writing. Anybody? Yes, no, I believe that, I don't. Got a couple no's. Okay, more no's. I used to believe that. One person says yes. One person says, I know that's not true. And I've got to hope so. Okay, let's go to the next one. You get a lot more exposure and publicity when you're with a big house. Do you believe that to be true? Yes or no? So I've got yes, not necessarily. Yes, definitely. Not unless you're already famous. Sometimes. Okay, great. We have a good range of opinions here, which is perfect. All right, how about this one? Self-publishing is for people who can't get legitimately published. How many people believe that? No, used to be, wrong, no. Okay, disagree. Okay. And how about you have to buy thousands of books and store them for years when you self-publish? How many of you believe that to be true? I've got no, hope not, no. Okay, great. Most of you don't think that's true. Okay, one more. You can always tell if a book was self-published because it looks it. How many of you believe that to be true? I'm getting no's, maybe, no. Okay, now let's just take these statements and let's take the first four. Now let me tell you, the first four used to be true, and really not too long ago. But publishing has evolved so much, even in the last 2-3 years, that none of those first statements are true. The only one that is a problem for a lot of authors is you can always tell if a book was self-published because it looks it. Now, the word always is the operative word here. You can tell only if the book really wasn't done the way that it should have been. And that's what I really want to keep you from doing. So that's why you're here today, so you can learn all the secrets of doing it the best way possible. Okay, so knowing that your greatest obstacle really is publishing a quality book in every way that's worthy of you as an author and all the time and love and sweat that you put into this book, and of course for your readers. So what is the solution to that? It is to be above the rest. I can't stress enough that I don't want you to even think about producing your labor of love without being smart, sophisticated, and savvy so that you create a book that sells. Now, we're going to talk about how we can do that by looking at 3 key questions. Now, each of these questions is multi-layered, has many different phases to address each of those questions, but these are the big 3 that I want you to really think about. The first one is, who is my audience? And this is vital because you don't ever want to write a book if you have no idea who your audience is, or you're not sure if you have an audience. Most people want to write a book because they want to sell it. So you can't do that without an audience. So that's a huge question for you to tackle, and we're going to talk about it in more detail in just a moment. The second question is, which publishing option is right for me? And we're going to briefly touch on traditional and self-publishing so that you can see some pros and cons. And the third question is, how do I get from manuscript to market if I self-publish? Now, this is obviously a huge question that has many different elements to it, and we don't have time today to get into them in real detail, but I am going to touch on all the most important things so that you can at least walk away with a really great idea of what you need to do. So who is my audience? I want to touch on the breakdown of who your audience is so that you can start thinking about these things if you haven't done so already. So first of all, who will my book benefit most? Now, if you're a nonfiction writer, this is really important because obviously with nonfiction, you want to convey some benefit to the reader, whether you're helping them become better leaders, or you're helping them with their health in some way or another, or you're helping them get through a difficult time, like a self-help book or something like that. So you want to really think about, who is my book going to benefit the most? For example, if you're writing a book on leadership, who exactly is going to be your reader? Is it the person in mid-management? Is it mostly women, or only men, or only entry level, or people in big corporations or small companies? You got to figure out all those little details so that you know who your book will benefit the most. Along the same lines, what types of readers will enjoy my book the most? Now, this goes for fiction and nonfiction. And you want to think about things like, is it someone who's a parent, maybe a parent of a particular type of child, maybe with a challenge? Or is it someone who loves suspense or humor? Or is it a person who is really engaged with their own health and well-being? Again, thinking about the types of readers that will really eat up your book and enjoy it the most. Another question is, what are your book's seven most pertinent keywords? Now, keywords, as you probably already know, really govern the online world. So I throw out the number 7 because Amazon allows 7 if you publish through CreateSpace, which we'll talk about shortly. They also allow, I believe they allow 5. Barnes & Noble allows so many characters. So 7 is a really good number for you to get really clear on, because as people are online, especially on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, they're going to be searching for certain types of books if they don't know your title. So you really want to narrow down those keywords that are most pertinent to your book. Okay, you also want to think about what books yours can be compared to. Now, this is really key because someone may have already written the book that you want to write and maybe even done it better than you can. Or maybe you have this wonderful idea and you think it's a novel idea, but guess what? Someone has really already done it. One of the really key things for you to make sure is that if the market is already saturated for your type of book, then how are you going to make yours stand out from others in its genre? Now, here's a really great example. My very first book client, she wrote a book on getting into a top MBA program. And I asked her in our first conversation, I said, I mean no disrespect, I'm so excited for you, but there must already be a lot of books out there on the market for getting into an MBA program. So how is yours different? And she was very smart. She had already thought this through and she already knew. She said, well, yes, there are a lot of other books out there on this topic, but mine is a workbook, which nobody else has really done the way that I'm doing it. And mine is also really focused in a very concentrated way on the personal essay in a way that a lot of other books aren't addressing it. I have a different perspective than some other people do. And so she already had a way to help herself stand out in her market so that she wasn't really trying to compete exactly with the other books out there. She had a really special niche for her book, and that helped her tremendously in her marketing. And then the last thing is to think about, where do your readers gather and what groups do they belong to? Again, we don't have time to get into lots and lots of details about these things, but I want to throw them out there for you to think about, because if you haven't, these different elements are going to be very crucial for you to figure out your audience and know how to direct every aspect of your book, the cover to draw the right audience, the interior, the tone of your book. Obviously, the content needs to address your audience perfectly, and then how to market it to the right audience. So if you think about physical locations or organizations and groups that people might belong to, even if it's just book clubs or things like that, if you're a fiction writer. But these are all things that I want you to be thinking about when we talk about who is my audience. Okay. Now, question number 2, which publishing option is right for me? Now, obviously, we have traditional publishing, which has been around forever, and we also have self-publishing, which has evolved so much in the last couple years and given so many great opportunities for writers. So I really wanted to give you a pro and con list for both, because one is not necessarily better than another. One is going to be better for you than another. So my goal here is not to say that traditional publishing is out, self-publishing is in, or vice versa. It's really to let you assess what's best for you as an author. So let's take a look at traditional publishing, some of the pros. First of all, you get the endorsement of a major house. And even if it's not Simon & Schuster or Random House or one of its subsidiaries, maybe it's even just a small press. But still, for a lot of people, that's really important to have that endorsement. It's not necessarily the make or break of whether you're going to be successful. I can tell you that for sure. But for some people, that is important, and it lends to credibility for them. So that could be a pro. You do have an agent who negotiates on your behalf. Of course, you do need to acquire that agent, but we'll talk about that in a moment in the con section. But you do have someone negotiating on your behalf in traditional publishing. Also, they're going to provide all the editing, layout, and cover design for you. So you're not going to have to think about any of those things. Some of the editing, yes, there will be some back and forth in the editing process. But as far as all the rest of it, once they acquire your book, they're really going to take it from manuscript to market. Now, they handle all of the printing and distribution for you, and they pay you. Okay, so even though royalties may not be spectacular, the bottom line is they pay you. Okay, so those are some of the pros of traditional publishing. Now let's look at some of the cons. One is that you do have to write a proposal and a query letter, and you need to query agents until your manuscript has been accepted. And just to kind of give you an idea, I have a very good friend who is now published by a small press. She actually got an agent within 3 months. She was jumping for joy. She thought, oh my gosh, my book's going to get published right away. Well, it took 4.5 years for that wonderful agent who fully believed in her book to sell it to a publisher. So while her book is fantastic, it just wasn't right for a lot of them, the bigger publishing houses, or it wasn't right at the time, whatever it might have been. So it took her almost 5 years before it was even in the process of getting published. And then it took another year before it came out. So that's just something to think about. It can be a con for a lot of people. You really have little to no say in your book's design when you traditionally publish. Publishing houses don't want to go back and forth with authors over whether they like their cover and whether they like the interior design or which one they like the best. They don't even go there. You might get a choice between 2 covers, but that's usually about the best you can hope for. And that's probably more with a small press than a big one. That's all of the input that I've had from authors from talking to so many authors over time. So that can be a con for a lot of people. There's a typical 1-year time frame between the time your book is acquired. Again, this doesn't mean from the time you get an agent, and the time it actually comes out. For some people, that feels like a really long time. For some people, it might not. There's really very little marketing with traditional publishing today. So unfortunately, those of you who thought that you could be with a big house and you could just focus on writing and they would market your book for you, they just don't have the budgets for marketing anymore in publishing. So unfortunately, as one person said, unless you're a big name, you're not going to get a whole lot of attention. And that's unfortunately very true. Also, the loyalties are really quite low, and I'm going to talk to you shortly. I'm going to show you some royalty numbers. I don't want to overwhelm you with numbers, especially if you're not a numbers person, but I did want to show you to give you an example, especially if this is very new to you and you're really trying to figure out the best route for yourself, what you can compare between the two. And then also, there's no guaranteed contract for future titles. And this can be a con for people. A lot of people go into traditional publishing and think if I get a publisher and I have another book that they're going to publish that one too. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. In fact, a lot of times it doesn't happen. I know some very successful authors who have written wonderful books and their names that people know, and the publisher has dropped them. And it's really sad to hear that, but it's true. I've known too many authors who've had to go out and find another publisher for the next book. Now, sometimes if you have a series and the publisher really believes in the series that you want to write, you may get a contract for 2 or 3 books for that series. So do keep in mind that that can happen. But especially if you're a brand new first-time author, getting that contract is hard enough as it is, and typically you're not going to be guaranteed a contract for future titles. So again, pros and cons. Not to say that one type of publishing is better than another, but I just want you to be able to assess for yourself. Okay, let's take a look at self-publishing. The pros of self-publishing are you have some freedom of options. Now, what POD is, in case this is new jargon for you, is print on demand. And what that means is very different from the old school, what we called vanity publishing, where you did in fact have to buy 5,000 or 10,000 of your books and store them somewhere safely for sometimes many, many, many years. Today there is print on demand. And what that means is you can have your book produced and published by a company who only prints it as it's ordered. So you don't have to buy any stock in your book. You can if you want to. So if you travel and you give talks, or you want to have some of your books at small signings or for clubs or whatever it is you might be doing, you can absolutely buy a quantity of your own books at cost, but you do not have to sink thousands of dollars into inventory anymore. And that has really opened the doors for a lot of people, because POD does allow you to sell your book online, for example, but you're not dealing with fulfilling the orders, shipping them out. That all happens on demand. So if that is a new term for you, hopefully that clears up what POD is. Another pro is that the time frame is essentially yours. Now there's an asterisk there, because I want you to understand that the real time frame that you should be thinking about that is really crucial for most books is at least 6 months. So when I say the time frame is yours, that does not mean you want to be rushing books into the marketplace. That is not the way we improve the world of books. That is not the way we have credible authors in the world. So rushing a book is something I really don't want you to ever think about doing. But 6 months is a really good gestation period for manuscript to market, working with an editor, working with their book designer. And the great thing about that time frame, even though at times it can be shorter, it really depends on how long your book is, how much editing it needs. There are lots of factors involved, of course. Every book is different. But the great thing is that you really need that 6-month period to be building a platform, to be looking at who your audience is and building an audience. And again, that's way beyond the scope of the time that we have today together. But that's a really great period of time for while your editor, your book designer is perfecting your book, you could be working on building your platform and reaching out to people that might be really interested in your book. And that's what you want. You want people excited when it comes out. So when I say time frame is yours, I just want you to keep that in mind. Another pro is that you have total control over your book's design, marketing, and pricing. And for a lot of people, that is a huge benefit of self-publishing. It's a lot of fun. I know when I work with my authors, it's a really special assignment for me to bring a book from manuscript to market with an author. It's very personal to me because I know how personal it is for you. And so being in a collaborative relationship and looking at, all the different ways that we can bring this book together beautifully can be really special for authors. And so that is definitely a pro for a lot of people. You own all the rights to your manuscript, to your design. There is a caveat to that, which I'll touch on more toward the end, but I just want you to keep in mind, in general, you own all the rights to your book, whereas if you don't self-publish, the publishing house owns the rights to it. You can make your book available to online retailers, so that is a definite pro. There are lots of online retailers, and so that door is open to you. You don't have to write a proposal, and you don't have to write a query letter and try to get an agent, which is a big pro for a lot of people. I know it's appealing to me as a writer, actually, because I've done it before, and I know, going through all the rejection is not always a whole lot of fun. So anyway. And also, royalties are much larger. And again, we're going to talk about royalties shortly, so you know what I mean when I say that royalties are larger. You'll be able to see a comparison. Okay, some of the cons of self-publishing is that possible lack of credibility. But let me just throw out there, let's say that Random House isn't on the cover of your book. Well, most readers aren't paying a whole lot of attention to who the publisher is. Magazines, yes. Mainstream bookstores, yes. But readers, not so much. What readers care about is quality writing, quality presentation. So the way to avoid a lack of credibility is to produce a top-notch book. And that's why you're here, and that's why I'm sharing all of this with you, so that you have the ability to do that. Again, poor editing or design really diminishes the integrity of a book. So you don't want to go there, and there's a way you can avoid that. You do have to pay to edit and design your book in its entirety. So you do have to think about having a budget for everything that you need to put into the book, and we will touch on that as well. There are limitations for reviews. You're not going to get a review in a big mainstream magazine, but there are some review sites and services that are starting to offer these things for self-publishing writers, not in an unethical way. Don't get me wrong. Do not ever go out and pay for a bunch of 5-star reviews. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about review services that are legitimate, who will give you an unbiased, legitimate review for your book. That can be on Amazon or elsewhere, but that can be a con for some people, is that limitation. Also, physical bookstores won't carry your book in general, and I'm talking about, Barnes & Noble's about the last national book chain we have, but most bookstores won't. But we're going to have a little bit of a sidestep to that in just a few minutes. And also, you do have to wear a lot of hats. As the author, you also have to be the publisher and the marketing person and your accountant, and you have to hire people to, work on your book with you as editor, book designer, publishing facilitator, all those kinds of things. For some people, it's just too much. So that could be a con for some people. Okay, so now that we know the pros and cons, and as I said, this is really individualized, you want to think about choosing your publishing company. Now, if you are traditionally publishing, this won't apply to you, but we're here today really talking about self-publishing and talking about all the different ways that you can go about it. So if you decide that that's the best avenue for you, choosing your publishing company is going to be an important step for you. Now, there are a lot of companies cropping up all over the place who will do books in the print version. Now, some of the ones that have been around the longest, like Lightning Source and Create Space, there are other companies like iUniverse and, oh my gosh, I can't even think of all of them, but Lulu is another one. Those are ones that you may have heard of. Lightning Source is actually affiliated with Ingram. Create Space is affiliated with Amazon, but both do distribute to all the main online sites. And they also do make your book available to bookstores if a bookstore decides to carry a book of yours. Again, without any regulation in self-publishing, bookstores are very reticent to do so, but the opportunity is there. There are also a lot of publishing houses that are cropping up in conjunction with some of the bigger presses, such as Simon & Schuster announced earlier this year that they have a new division called Archway Publishing. Now, just so you're not confused, Simon & Schuster will not be on the cover of your book. Archway Publishing will be. And most people have no idea that they are affiliated with Simon & Schuster. But basically what a lot of companies are doing is saying, hey, if writers are willing to pay to produce their books, why don't we open a division to help people do that? So again, these are things that you need to really think about when you are pursuing a publishing company and wanting to make the best decision for yourself. There are obviously a lot more print companies than just these, but those are some of the ones that you may have heard of. And then, of course, there's the ebook. And if you do a print book, you really should do an ebook. Not every ebook will have a print book, but most prints should have an e-version. And Amazon Kindle is, of course, the obvious one. Barnes & Noble, Nook Press. There's the iBookstore, which is affiliated with iTunes. And there are some companies like BookBaby or Smashwords that you might have heard of, where you can pay them to convert your manuscript. I don't really recommend those because you don't really know how your manuscript is going to come out. I really recommend that you hire somebody who knows how to do sound ebook design and who will ensure that your ebook will read perfectly on every single different device. And so, yes, there are lots of companies that do these things, but I just want you to be really smart when you're making those decisions. Okay, now here we are to the costs and royalties. Again, I don't want to overwhelm you, especially if you're not a numbers person, but I do want to just give you a taste of what royalties and costs are like in self-publishing, as well as in traditional publishing. So let's look at traditional. Now, as you probably already know, if you get a contract with a traditional publisher, you're going to get an advance. And that can vary a great deal. So I just picked a round number of 5,000. You might get a much bigger advance. You might get an advance that's about this. It really kind of depends on if you've been published before. There are a lot of factors involved. But anyway, let's say you get a $5,000 advance. Now, 15% of that up front goes to your agent, which means now you have gotten $4,250. Okay, now stay with me. I promise it's not too complicated. Now, let's say that the publisher prices your book at $20 and it's a paperback. So you're going to get about a 6% royalty on that paperback, which is $1.20 per book. So in order to make back that $5,000 advance that they've paid you, the publisher has to sell 4,167 books before they're going to start paying you any royalties. Okay, so you never know how long it might take to sell those 4,167 books. But again, the marketing departments are very strapped. They don't give a lot of marketing attention, especially to first-time writers. So it could take a pretty long time before you start seeing any royalties after that little advance. And then after that, royalties are usually paid either quarterly, sometimes only twice a year. So that's just something for you to think about. If you think getting a traditional house contract means you're going to make a lot of money, it can happen, certainly, and I don't want to discourage you, but this is the reality of how it's going to look like, at least for your first year. Okay, now with self-publishing, let's say that you spend $5,000 to professionally edit and design your book. Now, before you pass out seeing that number, I usually tell authors that depending on your book, the sweet spot for producing a truly top-notch book that rivals a traditional house publication in every way is a $3,000 to $5,000 range. And that depends on the length of your book. It depends on how sound the manuscript is when you start out, how much good self-editing you've done, how many chapters, how complicated the formatting is. Novels can certainly be less. But book design is a specialty. It's a specialized art. So cover and interior and all that good stuff and all the editing, that's a specialized art as well. It does take an investment, and you need to be prepared to make that investment if you want to have a book that really is credible in the marketplace. These are the kinds of figures that you would see within a publishing house. We just never see them. But publishers spend thousands of dollars to produce your book. And this is one reason why advances are typically fairly low, because they're taking a risk. They've already invested a lot of money in your book. They're going to give you a little bit, and then they're going to wait and see. And so I just wanted to give you that same number to think about. And then let's just throw in $2,500 for marketing. That's just a very random number. If you hire a publicist, you're going to need a much bigger budget than that. But if you are trying to just publicize as much as you can on your own, you can obviously do a lot for free through social media. You can also reach out to groups and organizations. You can do presentations and things like that. So $2,500 might cover some traveling fees and some gas money and maybe some fees for materials and things like that. So that's just, again, a round number that I threw out there. That is not what I would tell every single author to plan for. Your plan has to be individual for you. So let's just say that $7,500 was your initial investment in producing your book from manuscript to market. Okay, let's also say that you list your book at $20 and it's about a 200-page paperback book. Now I'm giving you the page count because the amount of money that you make has a lot to do with how long your book is. So every page costs to print. And even though it's very low, it might be, a fraction of a penny or something like that, it still adds up. So if you have a 200-page book, it's obviously going to cost less to produce than a 400-page book. So just for the sake of example, we're going to imagine a 200-page book, which I have produced for a client before. So these are actual numbers I took from her book. With Amazon, you're going to make about a 40% royalty, which is $8 a book. Now that's a far cry from $1.20 a book, as you can see there side by side. Now CreateSpace, which I mentioned before, is affiliated with Amazon. If you publish through them, they give you a free e-store. And one of the perks of that, it's not really anything super special, but one of the perks of it is that you get an even higher royalty if people buy through your e-store. It's actually a really great store for you to have if you have people who want to buy in bulk. You can actually give them discount coupons to do so through an e-store. But your royalty is around 60%, which means you'd make about $12 a book. Now, again, keep in mind, this is a 6x9, 200-page black and white interior with a color cover. So your book is not going to match this exactly, but this gives you at least a good idea. So with those numbers, you're looking at selling 938 books through Amazon to make back your $7,500 investment, or 625 books through your CreateSpace e-store. So as you can see, you have to sell a lot fewer books to make back an even bigger investment in your book. The question for a lot of people is, do I have that money to invest? And I would say if you don't have it now, wait until you do. You will be so happy that you did. I can't tell you how many authors who've come to me who wish they had done it right the first time. They spent not so much money the first time around, and now they really regret it. So again, one of the biggest reasons I'm doing these webinars is because I really want to save people from doing it wrong the first time, so that you're not compromising your credibility or your reputation, certainly not spending money the wrong way. I want you to spend your money the right way. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a clear picture without overwhelming you too much. But as you can see, the royalties are quite different, and that is definitely a perk for a lot of people entering the world of publishing and choosing to be an independent publisher. Okay, the big granddaddy question: how do I get from manuscript to market if I self-publish? And this is a huge question because obviously we keep talking about the same elements over and over. We keep talking about editing and book design and cover design and all these things. So there are obviously a lot of layers between the manuscript and the book in your hand. Now, one of the biggest things that I really want to convey to you in this webinar is that just because you're a writer does not qualify you to be an editor or a proofreader. Professional editors and proofreaders are trained in their craft. This is not something that every writer can do. And for some reason, a lot of writers think, well, I can write, so I can edit. Well, to some degree, that's true. You should be able to self-edit pretty well. But let me just tell you, I know more than one incredible author who is a fantastic storyteller who really doesn't write very well. And when I say that, I mean the author admittedly says, I have no skill in spelling and capitalization. I don't know anything about mechanics. All I know is how to tell a great story. And they tell great stories, these two particular authors I know. Neither one of them has really great writing skills as skills go. And they both say, without my editor, I would be nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I really want to convey to you that it's important for you not to think that because you're a writer, you are therefore a professional editor or a professional proofreader. That is typically not the case. Likewise, just because you're a writer does not mean that you are qualified to be a book designer. Again, this is a very specialized field. Book designers are trained. We're trained in industry standards. We're trained in lots of secrets and special program and all these things to make a book look really easy to produce. But in reality, books have a lot of underlying stuff going on that we do as book designers that no one has any clue that we do to make them look perfect, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter. There's a whole lot going on there. So being a writer does not equal being a book designer. I cannot stress that enough. And likewise, being a writer does not qualify you to be a graphic designer. So I don't want you to think that I'm harping on this topic, but again, I've just seen so many authors regret that they tried to do their own cover when they weren't a graphic designer, try to do their interior when they weren't a book designer, or edit their own books when they're not editors. And this is where you get into trouble. So I wrote a blog recently on this topic, and one of the things I said at the end was, think about it this way. Just because we know how to drive doesn't qualify us to be a mechanic, for example. Or just because we know our way around the kitchen doesn't qualify us to be a chef in a restaurant. Or one of my favorites, just because we are fans of Law and Order and haven't missed an episode doesn't qualify us to be an attorney, right? So it's the same thing. Just because you're a writer does not qualify you to be an editor, proofreader, book designer, or graphic designer. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because I really want you to hire a professional editor and proofreader for your project. This is so important for your book. I really can't stress it enough. You also do need to hire a professional book designer for your cover and your interior. You will be so happy you did, because the presentation of your book says a lot about you. Now, while some readers might not really notice, not everybody is super attentive. The bottom line is you should be so proud of your work. You should be able to hold it next to a book right out of a bookstore and not be able to tell the difference. Those are the only books that I produce for my authors. And I think it's really important that authors want that quality for their books. I mean, you've worked so hard on it. You should want the best for it. And readers deserve it too. This may sound a little counterintuitive, but you should consult a professional to write a compelling title, subtitle, book description, and author bio. Now, this may be where you may be able to nail your title and even nail your subtitle, but some people really can't, and we're going to look at a few examples of that. But even book descriptions and author bios can be really, really hard for authors. We'll talk about that shortly. And you really should hire a professional website and graphic designer to create your site and your promo materials. Now, some people can get by with making their own sites, and so I don't want to discourage that. If you have the know-it-all to do it, go for it. But some people do have absolutely no idea what to do, technologically speaking, and they try to make a site, and what ends up happening is it's just a poor reflection on you, and you don't want that. You want your readers to be impressed. So those are the 4 biggies. Okay, now why are these steps so critical? 1, to emphasize your credibility. So if you are a nonfiction writer, you want your circle of colleagues, people in your community, to find you credible. If you don't edit well or design well or put out a book that looks professional, you're not going to have that credibility with them. And same if you're a fiction writer too. I don't mean to leave fiction out. That's certainly important as far as credibility with your readers. You want to project a level of professionalism and a superb reputation. You can't do that if your book is done in an amateur way. Also, you can augment your chances of being carried in a bookstore. And I just want to briefly tell you that local bookstores are really a goldmine for authors. They can be. Let me just tell you a really quick story. One of my clients approached a local bookseller and asked if he would be willing to carry her book because she lived right in the same town as the bookstore. And the bookstore owner kind of looked at her and said, well, I really prefer not to because I can't get the discount that I get from a distributor if I buy directly from you. And I think that was what he was hoping was going to be his out. And my author replied, well, actually, I can give you the same discount because I can purchase my book at cost and I would happily sell it to you for the amount that you would normally buy it from a distributor, which is typically 50 to 55% off the list price. And she would still have a profit margin in doing that. So, oh, okay. He said, well, do you have the book with you? And she could tell by the tone of his voice that he wasn't too enthusiastic about looking at a self-published book. Again, why? Because there's no regulation on self-published books. And a lot of self-published books look amateur. And bookstore owners don't want to carry books that look amateur. And he looked at her book and his eyes kind of lit up. And I'm not telling you this to be bragging about me. I was just so happy for her that we had done a book that this bookstore owner looked at and he said, wow, it looks completely professional. He flipped through it. He said, it looks like any other book in my store. I really didn't expect that. And she said, well, I'm really glad you feel that way. And he said, I would be happy to carry your book. So again, this is really crucial for having bookstore owners look at your book and think, hey, yes, I'm willing to put your book on my shelf and I won't feel like it's an amateur book that really doesn't belong in my store. And the last thing is to increase the possibility of a large publisher noticing your book. This is a whole other topic for probably another webinar, but publishers are watching those Amazon top 10 lists. I do want you to be aware of that. And they're looking to see who's publishing these books, these bestsellers, even if it's a bestseller for a brief time. And as you've probably heard, there are authors who have gotten some pretty sizable contracts with big publishing houses because they did all the work themselves. They did a fantastic job and they've gotten the attention of a big publisher. Now, whether or not you would want to enter that contract, it would be up to you. You might be doing really great on your own, and maybe having that big publisher name on your book isn't enough to sway you to go from a self-published author. For some people, that is their goal. So the better your book is, the more chance that can happen. Now, I don't want to get your hopes up that that's what's happening with everybody, but it is certainly something that's happening more and more, and I think it will continue to. Okay, so let's just touch briefly on hiring a professional editor. If you're not sure about what all the different editing terms mean, because it can get confusing for writers, developmental editing, which is also called substantive editing, is for overall structure, consistency, flow, delivery, and clarity of content, transitions, the tone. It's the granddaddy. And typically when we're doing developmental editing for nonfiction, we're making sure that everything flows the right way. Everything fits in the book the way it's supposed to. If things need to be deleted, they get deleted. If something needs to be filled out, we need to work with the author to fill it out. That every chapter in the book reflects the title and the theme of the book. That if the chapter is called something, everything in the chapter relates to the theme and doesn't belong in a different chapter. So this is really complex. This type of editing takes a lot of time, a lot of passes, a lot of back and forth with the author. And that's why it commands the investment that it does, because it is crucial and it does take a lot of time. Copy editing is really about mechanics. So we're looking at spelling, capitalization, punctuation, varied vocabulary, all the different mechanic elements, sentence structure, italics versus quotation marks, all those little things. And developmental editors are typically copy editing as they go. Some people will do copy editing alone for specific types of projects, but for full books, you really need a developmental editor. And if you're a novelist, then your fiction editor is looking for your story arc, the development of your characters, where is the climax in the book? Does it fit right? How does the suspense work, or how does the building of the story work? Again, the story arc. So all those kinds of things are happening with fiction. And then the proofreading phase is after the editing and the typesetting is already done. And you really want to plan for several of these before you publish. I can't stress enough how important this is. Every author is shocked at how many things pop up in the third or fourth proofread, when a whole team of proofreaders, including a professional, might have been going through it, and then, oh my gosh, where did that come from? So that's a really important phase, and that's making sure that there aren't any missing words, or there's not a comma in the wrong spot, or little things aren't missing. And believe me, when you've worked with material for a long time, it's very easy to overlook things like that, even for professionals. We're not perfect either. So that's a really important phase for your book that should happen several times. Okay, hire a professional book designer. I've kind of touched on this already, but let's just take a look at an example, because your book cover really has to be created for your target audience by a professional graphic artist. I don't want you to skimp here. I don't want you to use those little fill-in templates with no real typography and no real style going on. This is your reader's first impression, and think about the readers who only shop online. They have this thumbnail, and then they click on that thumbnail and they see the cover. They're not going to go too much further if that cover looks terrible. They won't even read the description or figure out what more, the book has going for it. A lot of people just click off, or they don't click on it at all. Now, I just want to give you an example, and please know that I am not in the habit of picking on people at all. This cover, I happened to find it on a site where there were a bunch of examples of poor book cover design. And so whoever this poor person is, I apologize that I've picked on you, but I only did because it was an example before. But if you look at this cover, you can see that it is a very template looking cover. There is nothing special about the typography. It's a very trite font. It's a very, quite an arresting bright color for this background. There's just a photo plugged into it. I mean, you as a reader probably aren't terribly impressed. That picture's really cool in sepia, but overall the cover looks very, very amateur. Now, again, this is not about me bragging. This is just about showing you what a professionally done cover looks like when there has been sound, target, market analysis going on. The person has read the book in its entirety, understands what the book is about. So whether or not you particularly love this cover is really not the point. Obviously, cover art is very subjective. But the point is that when I was doing this cover, and I chose this one to show you because the book just came out, and I'm so proud of these authors. They have written such an incredible book. It's very, very special in its niche of business and motivation. So I'm giving them a little extra plug in my webinar today. But you can see, as far as typography, just the layering of photographs, the different types of graphic elements going on, that there's a big difference between the two. So anyway, I just wanted to give you an example. You definitely want to have a book interior that meets industry standards in all aspects. And believe me, if you're a writer and you're not a book designer, you don't know what these are. You need to be trained in this. So you want your book to be beautifully reflected in typography, in graphics, custom chapter headers, the first letters, the layout, the line-by-line formatting. All those special touches really need to be present in the interior of your book. And your cover and interior really should be cohesive. So if you do decide to hire a separate cover designer from your interior designer, you'll definitely want to allow them to either communicate, or if the cover's done first, then provide that to your interior designer, or vice versa. Usually the cover we do first. That way you can use it for promotional purposes while the rest of the book is being done. But you do want them to go hand in hand. They shouldn't seem so separate that they don't really go together for the reader when the book comes out. Now, when I mentioned consulting a professional writer for your key materials, an excellent strategic audience targeted title and subtitle really can make or break the sales of your book. And a lot of people just don't really get that. And don't feel bad if you don't. Don't feel bad if you don't know a lot of these things. Because as a writer, you're trying to either be a storyteller, or you're trying to bring material to the marketplace that is important, that you think is going to benefit people. And you may be really good at that. But title writing, subtitle writing, book description writing, all these things are specialties. And they really command someone who understands your market to do this the right way for you. So as an example, this book on the left that I did with Jim Skinner, Smart Patient, Smart Money. Now that was a great title. He already had the title. But if I had written his subtitle with those same words and said something like the title, Smart Patient, Smart Money, and I said, How Smart Patients Save Money, that would be a real waste of real estate on the front of the book, because we've already said Smart Patient, Smart Money. So we don't want to use those same words over and over again. So for example, his first subtitle was Financial Wellness for the Healthcare Consumer, which isn't a terrible subtitle, but it's a little flat. It didn't really convey the benefits. And when you're writing nonfiction, a subtitle really needs to convey benefits. So I worked on it for a long time, worked with the material in the book. and came up with the simple guide, simple being very important here about saving money with healthcare, to becoming an educated, empowered, money-saving champion of the healthcare you deserve. So you can kind of feel the difference. There's a lot more punch. There's the word simple. It's a guide. What am I going to become? And it's healthcare I deserve. So there's a lot of benefits going on and conveying to the reader what they're going to get out of that book. Same thing happened with Ditch Dare Do. Great title. The author came up with that title, loved the title, but when he gave me the subtitle, again, it was a bit flat. 3D personal branding for executives. Be indispensable, indestructible, incredibly happy. It's kind of like, the idea is there, but it just needed some tweaking. So anyway, we worked together and came up with 66 ways, there we go, something concrete, to become influential, indispensable, and incredibly happy at work. So we have how many ways, what you're going to become, and where. So these are just some things for you to think about. When you're thinking about subtitles, you really want to utilize that real estate, because also the key words in your title and subtitle are the ones that are going to be searched more than any other one. Those are the ones that are going to match the search engines. So you want to be really careful about using great words. Okay, enough of that. For book descriptions, you need a few variations and lengths of book descriptions, both for your cover and your online readers. And again, they have to be written strategically. So I don't want you to feel bad if this is hard for you. It is really, really hard to write a book description. Pretty much everybody struggles with this because you've written this full-length book and now you have to boil it down to a few paragraphs. It's very hard to do. So don't feel bad about it, but do be smart about it. Hire somebody who can write a really great book description for you that will impact your reader. Same thing with your author bio. Sometimes it's really hard to write about yourself. So I've had authors say, okay, here are all the facts about me. Can you write something great about me? And a lot of times it just works out a whole lot better than the author trying to do it themselves. You may be able to write a great book description and a great author bio. I'm not saying that you won't. You may even capture the most perfect title and subtitle on your own. And more power to you if you have the strategic ability to do that. But if you don't, just be careful not to sell your book short by not having a professional help you with those aspects. And the graphic and website designer, again, you just want to really make the right impression with a great professional promo postcard or a bookmark, a business card, or a media kit or a one sheet. If you're doing any ads like web ads or a banner for your website or things like that, maybe your cover designer can create something really special for you with your cover art and some related graphics. And you definitely want to have a great online presence because everybody knows how important the online presence is today. So when you're thinking about doing a website, if you can invest in a professional to do it for you, definitely think about that. Okay, we're almost to the end. I know we're a tiny bit over, but I really do want to go over some of the questions that you should be asking because I know that as self-publishing authors, you could be really overwhelmed. And you also might be either really trusting or maybe really cynical. And wherever you land in that range, you might have a hard time knowing what questions to ask. And I really want you to be armed with good questions because I want you to make the best decisions for you. I want you to hire the best providers. I want you to work with the best company for you. And so these are some questions that I just want you to be thinking about. Again, you do have access to the slides, and if you want them at the end, I'm happy to send them to you. So we'll go through these rather quickly. I don't want to keep you too much after 5, but I will be happy to do Q&A if you want to stick around for a little bit at the end. I will be happy to do about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A if you'd like, but hopefully you can at least stick around for this very last section of the right questions to ask. First of all, what is provided? I just want to touch really quickly on if you decide to hire one of these self-publishing companies that offers packages, make sure you know what you're getting for that $1,500 package or that $3,000 package. Usually they outline them pretty well on websites, but I just want you to be really aware because if you get to the end of the project and you go, well, wait a minute, I don't have this, or what about this? And they say, well, that's not included in your package. That's an add-on and that's going to cost this much. I just don't want you to be blindsided anywhere in your project by not realizing that something wasn't provided to you. So make sure you know exactly what you're getting if you pay for a package. Same goes if you're paying an hourly rate. I, for example, work on an hourly rate. I give a proposal for the fairest range that I can come up with. But every book is so unique, and I never know exactly how much time, but I give the fairest possible range that I can at the outset. But again, make sure you know exactly what's being provided to you for that hourly rate, or for that flat fee, or for that package fee. How are fees calculated? Again, make sure that if you're paying an hourly rate, how is that working? Exactly what are you paying for by the hour? Are you being charged flat fees, or per page fees, or per word fees, or for so many words a certain fee? So just know that going in for all the aspects of your book, okay? How much flexibility and control do I have? Again, if you're a self-publishing author, one of the perks is having some control. So if you hire a company, for example, or even if you hire an independent, I would say independent should absolutely have more flexibility and give you more control. I know that I do with my authors. I can't speak for everybody else, but you definitely want to know how much say you get in your book's design, and how it's going to look, and how much control you have. You might sign up for a package and they give you a template and they say, well, here's what we're going to do. And you say, okay, and you don't see your book again until it's done. So I just want you to be aware that that is a really good question for you to ask, so that you're not stuck wondering, well, shoot, what's going on with my book? Someone's had my book for 2 months now and I haven't seen it. How many changes can I make? A lot of these questions kind of go hand in hand with each other. But again, you might pay for something. Say you pay a flat fee for a book cover. And they say, okay, well, for $400, we'll do a cover for you. And you can make 2 changes to that cover. And then every subsequent change is going to be $60 or $40 or whatever it might be. So again, you want to make sure that you ask, if I pay for this, how many changes do I get to make? Communication. Obviously, communication is so key in any partnership. And I know that I typically work with my authors for anywhere from 4 to 9 months, depending on how much we're doing together. And the schedule of the author can play a big role in why it takes longer for us to do a book together. But communication, are you going to communicate by phone? Are you going to use email predominantly? If you want to talk to your designer by phone, is that something you can do? Do you have to schedule it? How far in advance do you have to schedule it? How often are you going to hear from this person by email? Are you going to see your files regularly? And another thing that I really want you to think about is when you are interviewing or seeking out people online as providers, look at how they communicate with you initially. How long does it take them to get back to you? What is the tone of the email? Are they good to you from the start? They should be just as good to you before you're a client as they are when you are a client. And so if you feel like you're not very special to them from the start, or they're very short, or they take a long time to get back to you and don't explain why, certainly people can be on vacation. We don't want to disparage anyone for, not getting back to someone within a day. But again, those early signs can really let you know how the relationship is going to be throughout. And I don't want you to end up with a provider who's not a good communicator, especially in the way that you need communication. How often do I see the layout and design? Again, if we're going to work together, am I going to see every chapter? Do I get to have say in what different chapters look like, especially if we're doing some complex formatting, say, of a nonfiction book? Do I get to make suggestions? When I see the design, can we make changes? All those kinds of things. Oops. What are the editor or designer skills? You definitely want to know what kind of work they've done in the past. If they're new to book design, then what kind of portfolio do they have, say, as a graphic designer? Do they really have what it takes to be a cover designer? Have they worked as an editor, whether it's with a publishing house or as a freelancer? Or how much writing have they done, or editing have they done for other people? And what kind of availability do they have? Do they have such a full plate that you're just going to be another number on the calendar, and it's going to be really difficult for you to get your book done on time? So, don't be afraid to ask these questions. And the last one, this is something that I touched on early, which is about copyright retention. I just want to tell you, in case you don't already know this, if you hire a company, let's just pick on CreateSpace, because a lot of people use CreateSpace and I have no problem with them. I've used them to publish a lot of my clients' books, but I've done all of the editing and design work, so I haven't used them as a provider. But if you do decide to hire a company like that as a provider, I just want you to know that they own the rights to your book design. They own the rights to your cover design. If you pay them to do it, they maintain the rights to it. Now, what that means is, let's say you do a paperback with CreateSpace, and that's all that they offer, and you decide you want to put out a hardcover with, say, Lightning Source. You aren't going to be able to take that CreateSpace designed cover or interior over to Lightning Source and have them publish that book for you in a hardcover. You're going to have to pay to have that book completely redone. I don't want that to happen to you. So if this is not an issue for you, you may be fine with it. If you know you're only ever going to do this one paperback and you're only going to publish through CreateSpace, fine. You can certainly do an ebook on your own, or you can hire someone to do an ebook for you. But I just don't want you to get in that situation where you've paid good money for a design of a book and now you can't take it to another publisher and do it a different way, especially if you're not happy with the publisher you chose. And then you're stuck with them keeping the rights to your work. And I don't want that to happen to you. So when you have a contract with a provider, that's a really important question. I know in my contracts, I outline very clearly that once I'm paid for the work, the copyright for that work, the interior design, the cover design, whatever it is, the graphic design of a bookmark or whatever it is, belongs to my author, not to me. So they can go and they can publish it wherever they want. They can use it however they want. They've paid for it. It's theirs. So again, I just really want to protect you as authors from getting taken, from making poor decisions, from doing things that you'll regret the first time around. So I'm really happy that you were here with me today and that I was able to share all of this with you. Just to sort of wrap up before we jump into Q&A. If you can't stay for Q&A, then just stay for the wrap up and then you're welcome to go, of course. I know this has been a lot to absorb. I've shared a lot of information with you. I really toyed with how much to share with you in 1 hour's time. And every time I took something out, I thought, but that's so important. I don't want to not share that. So I hope you're not feeling too overwhelmed. I hope you're feeling more educated. I hope you're feeling more armed with great information as you embark on your publishing journey, because I certainly want you to have a clearer picture of all the vital steps involved in producing a book on your own as a self-publishing author. And of course, I would love to help you bring your book to fruition if I'm the best partner for you. I really take a lot of pride in being my author's trusted partner from manuscript to market. I brought a dozen books into the marketplace with my author clients. I have several more in the works right now, and all of them truly do rival traditional house publications. I would certainly love to be able to do that for you. If you're interested in finding out more about me, I have my website, which is creativecollaborations.com. If you're listening by phone and you're not seeing the screen, it's creative dash, I had to have the dash, someone owned my website otherwise, creative-collaborations.com. My website is very extensive as far as all the services I provide, my pricing. I'm very transparent in my business. I don't have anything hidden from my clients, so everything is all spelled out right there. I also write a blog twice a month, which is at blog.creative-collaborations.com. I do articles on all aspects of book production and publishing and what's going on in the publishing industry. So if you'd like to subscribe to my blog, I'd love to have you follow me. If you want to reach out to me by email, I'm at sjaaronson, that's Aaronson with 2 A's, at gmail.com. I do give 30-minute complimentary phone consultation. So if you want to call me and talk to me about your project and see if we're a good match for each other, I'm very, very happy to do that. The main thing is I really want you to be smart, savvy, and sophisticated as a self-publishing author so that you create a book that's credible, that's respected, and that sells. So I'm so grateful that you are here with me. If you need to go, I completely understand. I hope you got a lot out of today. But if you'd like to stay, I'm very happy to answer any questions that I can. I know that a few people popped some questions in a little earlier, so let me go back here and see what I can answer for you. So I got this question: what is the cost for each of these specialists? I did kind of touch on the range that I typically recommend for authors, which is between $3,000 and $5,000. Now, again, this is a range. This is dependent upon many, many factors: the length of your book, the type of book, how much complex formatting you need, how much editing you need. Some people really need a lot of editing and some people don't. Editing is a big expense and it's one you shouldn't go without. So, you might pay anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 for an editor based on your particular needs. Doing an interior book design could be anywhere from $600 for a pretty simple, maybe a basic novel, to $1,500 or even more than that if it's a very long book or you've got a lot of graphics and charts and things like that. So there are really a lot of factors involved in cost. And that's why I really want you to make sure that you compare providers when you start thinking about how you want to go about it. Really compare. You do get what you pay for. Don't hire an editor who works for $15 an hour. You're typically not going to get the best work. And so I really do want you to be careful about that. Don't do flat rates like I'll do your whole book for $200. That's just crazy. You're not going to get a professional book for that amount. Okay, let's see here. What is the budget you would expect an author to have for fiction and for nonfiction? Okay, so we pretty much talked about that. I would say for fiction, really it depends on the editing. Book design is still a crucial factor for fiction. A lot of authors think, oh, how easy can it be to just set margins and pick a font? Well, there's a lot more to book design than that. And so book design is something that is an investment. For a novel, it's definitely less than for nonfiction, depending on the type of book, but it also depends on how many chapters. I did a memoir that was 69 chapters. So that's a lot of custom chapter headers, a lot of custom first letters that have to be created in another program and inserted and all of that. So, those are factors to think about. Fiction typically is less as far as the design part, but it's the editing that is really the crucial element as far as determining how much you might spend. I know people who've spent $2,000 to $3,000 on editing, and they were so happy they did because their book really was a completely different level than it was when it started. And had they published it without that level of editing, it would have been a terrible book. So it depends on what you have to spend, obviously, but I would say if you really don't have the investment to make, wait until you do. Put money aside. Make sure that you're putting the very best book out there because, again, I've just seen too many people who did it wrong the first time, or did it badly, I should say, or put out an inferior or substandard book to what they really wish they had done, and they really regret it. Okay, what would an amazing publicist cost? Oh gosh, publicists can be anywhere from a few thousand a month to 10,000 a month. I actually had a client who had a friend who was a publicist, and it was going to be $8,000 a month. That I am certainly not putting publicists down. There are some fabulous publicists, and you can get some really great publicity with them. In fact, I know one that's on the call on the webinar with us today, and so I am not discouraging you from hiring a superb publicist, but you do have to be prepared that it's going to cost you probably thousands, whether it's thousands a month or for a 6-month commitment, it might be so many thousands. But again, you want to know exactly what that publicist is going to do for you. What kind of connections does the person have? Do they have a lot of mainstream magazine connections or TV or radio or things like that? If they have gotten a lot of publicity for people through different mediums, then it might be worth it for you. Again, it really depends on your budget, but there are some fabulous publicists out there. So don't let me discourage you from seeking them out if you have the budget for it. Let's see. Next question. Let's say I'm not that interested in selling to a wide readership and just want approximately 50 books, a few hard copies and the rest online. Can you recommend the cheapest but best company for this? It's a memoir. Memoir is actually one of those genres where a lot of people write a memoir that's really more for family and for friends. And so if you're not so concerned about impressing a mainstream audience and really much more about leaving behind your legacy or a special gift for the family, you can still hire someone like me to do your book. Or you could go with, Create Space or one of the other companies out there that offers book design. I would say that you don't need to invest a lot of money in marketing, especially if you're not trying to sell a lot of books. So you can certainly save your time and money in that regard. I wouldn't say that there's one particular company I would recommend. I would definitely say do your homework and compare. So, if you talk to someone like me, talk to some other freelance providers, talk to CreateSpace, talk to Lulu, find out what their costs are and what your royalties will be. That might be important to you, the amount of royalty. It might not. But as far as just the initial investment, I hope that gives you a little bit better idea. Okay, I have several children's plays I used in teaching with different subjects. Do you suggest marketing them individually at teacher supply stores or doing one book on plays? Oh, that's a question I've never had before. Thank you for that, Judy. I actually know Judy Smith. She's a retired teacher, and this is a great question, and I'm not sure that I have the absolute best answer for you because I haven't worked with plays. And so if I don't have the perfect answer, I'm certainly not going to make one up and pretend that I do. I would say that if you have a lot of plays that you've written, that having a collection might be a really nice way to present them for other teachers for use in the classroom. I would probably guess that a collection would be more cost effective, certainly for you and definitely for the teacher. So I would probably at least recommend putting them together if they all apply to the same grade level, for example, and they could all be used for the same ages or something like that, then I think it makes sense. Marketing them for teacher supply stores, that's certainly something you could reach out and do. Again, you're going to want to make sure that they look very professional, at least comparable to other books that teacher supply stores are carrying. Okay, let's see. Who governs royalty distributions? Is there an association? Well, that's a really great question. Actually, the royalty distributions are governed by the actual companies that are printing and distributing your book. So, for example, if CreateSpace is your printer and distributor, they are determining how much your book costs to print, and then they have to sell it to Amazon or any other online retailer at the expected discounted rate, which is typically 50 to 55% off the list price. And so whatever's left over in between is what the author gets. And some companies definitely take more of a percentage for themselves than others. So again, royalties are going to be something that you're going to want to look at when you're looking at self-publishing companies. I know Lightning Source and CreateSpace are pretty comparable. I know that Lulu's royalties are a bit lower. Some people don't do a lot of homework. They just go with the first company that they heard somebody else used. They don't compare. It's really a good idea in this climate to compare different companies. I can help my authors do that to some degree, but you really should do some footwork on your own so that you have an idea of what kind of royalties you can expect. And most companies should have some sort of royalty calculator that you can look at before you ever even open an account with them or commit to doing your book with them. They should be able to show you that. So if they don't, definitely don't pick that company. Only look at companies where they do show you what your royalties will be. Let's see. Does your website have a sample of a book you've created for someone? Yes, I actually have my whole portfolio on my website. It's on my main navigation bar. All of the book covers, book interiors, websites, and promotional materials that I've created for all of my authors are in my portfolio, so you're very welcome to go and see the work that I've done. Certainly look at other people's websites too and compare providers. Some people are going to be more drawn to one provider than another. I'm certainly not so arrogant to think that I'm the perfect person for everybody. I do make a real effort to make sure that I am a perfect match for someone's material and for the style that the person wants to work in and the goals of that particular person. So I do definitely want to suggest that you make a lot of comparisons and look for portfolios. Book designers, editors, we should all have portfolios on there. I know that I have an extensive one and lots of other providers do as well. Okay, let's see here. This person has actually given a suggestion to Judy with her plays. You might seek out a man named Darcy Rice in San Clemente. Well, that's very nice of you to give a suggestion for Judy. So that's Darcy Rice in San Clemente. Judy, if you want to get in touch with me afterward, if you're even still here, I will give that to you. And if she's gone already, EH, I will definitely pass that on. Let's see. Well, thank you, Susan, for coming. I appreciate the nice comment. Let's see. I'm going to make sure I haven't missed anybody's questions. EH also wanted to ask, does the designer handle graphics or photos for the interiors? I actually do. Because I'm a graphic designer, I can design special graphics for book interiors if the author needs that. A lot of authors supply me with photographs, or they might have a special logo or a graphic or something. As long as it's in high resolution and it is good for the book itself, I can certainly use things that are already done. I can certainly use photographs as long as they're high resolution. So I do a lot of books where some of the graphics and photos are provided to me. Sometimes I'm asked to actually seek photos out that would work well for the interior of a book, or I'm asked to create some sort of graphics, whether it's a chart or a graph or some kind of illustrated something for a particular part of the book. So I hope that answers that. Great. A nice comment from Vicky that this was very informative. I'm so glad it was. Well, it looks like that is all of the questions. I hope that I didn't miss anybody. I have this little box here that I'm scrolling through, so I hope I answered all your questions. If you are still with me, and I know some of you are, thank you so much for spending part of your early evening or later evening if you're on the East Coast with me. I really appreciate you being here. I really want the best for all of you as authors. That is my sincere wish for all of you, and I want to see you all bring your labors of love to beautiful fruition. Whether you work with me or somebody else, I just want you to have the best. So thank you so much for being here. If you want to reach out to me, I'm very happy, as I said, to schedule 30-minute complimentary consultations by phone. I'm happy to answer a question by email. But overall, I really just want to wish you all the best on your writing and publishing journey. Have a great evening.